On this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds, we review Kickstarter pages, and specifically a template for a Kickstarter page. We look at the Deliverance expansion and go step by step why we decided to do things the way we did them. So there's a lot to uncover in this. Bring a notepad and pen and make sure to take notes because it's going to get nerdy.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Or the Alliance.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined as always by Sean and not Rick. On this episode, we are going to talk about how to set up a successful Kickstarter campaign page. This is something that we haven't talked about in a while. We had, a long time ago, we had a 3-scroll test podcast that we did with Jeremy Howard, and that was great information. A lot of that still holds true today. But, after, I have more experience now. We've done well over 200 crowdfunding campaigns. We've raised probably well beyond $25, $26 million at this point for tabletop campaigns. And so, now we're going to talk about what actually works. So how you doing, Sean?
Yeah, well, we've also interviewed people like Alex Radcliffe, who talked about Kickstarter pages. We've also interviewed a gentleman called Ben O'Brien, who crafts Kickstarter pages. So we'll include links to all of these episodes that sort of summarize a lot of the things we're going to be talking about here. But this is actually a service we offer as Crowdfunding Nerds. We do a Kickstarter page review, and our whole team reviews the Kickstarter page, and we write up a PDF report, and we send very specific notes on the layout, the offer, and various things. We even do copy editing. So if there's any typos, we make sure to point those out. So we've done this a lot, and there's common mistakes we often see when going through this process. But again, we'll also include a link in the show notes. If you are interested in that service, we do provide that. We try and make that as affordable as possible, and I really think it's worthwhile just getting professionals to look over your page and offer feedback before you launch.
Absolutely. Especially even if you're good at this, you really need a second set of eyes. Your brain does weird things when you look at something that you've typed, even if you've typoed. It's you just need somebody else to oftentimes point that out. So, so let's start out at the basics. Like the very first element is, if you had $1 million and you could do it however you wanted, you would make a more compelling page in theory. But obviously, people listening to this are going to be on a budget, and some of them may need to even do it themselves, like the DIY. You may not have graphic design skill, but this is one area that a lot of people will choose to cut as far as, the if you have a limited amount of dollars to spend on pre-marketing and everything like that, there are certain things that are more important, like gathering a crowd. You will generally have to prioritize paid ads over, that little extra graphic design on your Kickstarter page. But there are certain things that you can do that don't necessarily cost, that I think are essential. If you don't do these things, your campaign will sink immediately. Or maybe if you do the wrong things, right? The first one is, if you misspell a lot of words, I would never back your campaign. You clearly either don't have attention to detail or don't have a firm grasp of the language that you are trying to sell me on, the game that you're making. And so it's just very, very important that you would not have any typos. I mean, that's, maybe one. And when somebody points it out, fix it immediately, because it really does lower the number of people that trust you.
In fact, I was talking to my father-in-law once, and at the time he was working for Salesforce, and he was in charge of hiring, and they'd get a stack of CVs for these different positions. And he told me that if he ever saw a CV or resume that had one typo, he just binned it. It didn't matter what was on the CV, but it had one typo, he just binned it. And he even says one of his colleagues was sort of shocked. Why are you binning this? This is a really good candidate. He's like, no, it's got a typo. And that was his criteria. It's like, if you can't, submit a professional resume to this job, then you're probably gonna maybe not the right position, not in the right position for what they're looking for. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I was like, yikes! Look at my CV, make sure there's nothing there.
Yeah, and really, what you're doing is, when you put together a crowdfunding page on Kickstarter or GameFound or wherever, you are in essence putting together a proposition for prospective backers, and you're making a case for yourself, and you want that case to be as compelling as possible, that you are trustworthy, that you're making a great product, and that it will be delivered. So there are a lot of elements to that, but one of them that we use this, we throw around this term on this podcast all the time, called hygiene factors. Good hygiene is what I call this, but you need to make sure that you're not doing things that are hurting your chances of convincing somebody to back you. And one of the biggest things is typos. So we probably don't need to talk about it a whole lot more than that, other than just to mention how important this is. And if you don't have the money to hire a copy editor, you have friends, you have family, you have colleagues that wouldn't mind trading some service. If I review your page, then you'll review mine, or other things like that. Even fans. I think having fans that can review your Kickstarter preview page is, that can be very valuable. So, let's see. So, like a second very common thing that you need to really focus on is the offer. This is something that we probably don't need to spend too much time on this, because we spend so much time on this on other podcast episodes about the actual Kickstarter offer. But there are some really key ratios that if you mess up these ratios, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
If your game is $50 and your shipping's $30, I'm not buying it. I don't pay $30 for shipping a $50 product. That's crazy, right? If your game was $60 and your shipping was $20, now that's more reasonable.
And we did do a podcast specifically on pricing. It's called The Science of Pricing. There will be a link in the show notes of this episode that you can check out as well. That would be worth listening to, because there is a sort of psychological science to laying out your pricing, and it's very important that you get that right as well. But I think more so what we want to cover here is just like a template in terms of a general layout that you should follow. And maybe we'll look at your latest project, Andrew, or our latest project as a company, Deliverance Council of the Fallen, just as an example for us to go through, and maybe we can get some of your thoughts and to why you decided to do it this way. So I don't know if you want to share your screen, and maybe we could just go through it systematically. But we probably should start at the very top, which will be the project title, right? And maybe you want to talk about why did you name it the way that you did, and how does your project title impact the URL? I think that's something that people overlook. So we can jump into it.
Let's do that. So let's get into a specific campaign page. I'm going to use the Deliverance Council of the Fallen page, because it's something that I just put together. But the advice is all going to be very general, and not specific to a singular project, because the information that about how to make an awesome campaign page is very universal, I think. So there are, and that said, there are elements of what we're going to talk about that will change depending on your specific project. That should change, because if you do it right, you're going to have a unique project that might have very particular features that need to be highlighted in a way that's non-traditional. But what we're going to talk about, I would say 95% of it is going to apply to every single campaign. So let's.
And one thing I'll maybe just add before you dive in is it's also worthwhile reviewing the projects that you personally have backed. You can do this by looking at the back end of your Kickstarter profile, and then examining why did you back those projects? What do you like about those pages that you backed? What don't you like about them? That's a good place to sort of start. And then another place to go where you want to get more information of how to lay out your page is to go to tabletopanalytics.com. And if you're on desktop, you can go to the sort of bottom left, and there's a top grossing tab for active projects or archived projects. And then you can even filter by this year, so you can get the most contemporary projects that have done exceptionally well on the platform. And then just have a look through there, or any sort of within your wheelhouse, and use that as the basis to do some research and figure out what you like about those pages, what don't you like about those pages, how are you going to improve upon what they've done and implement it onto your page. So that's probably a good place, just in terms of a primer before you kind of dig into this. We obviously are going to use Deliverance because we worked on this, and we're going to talk about the behind the scenes of why we did the things we did, and hopefully you can then apply some of this to your project.
Yeah, and actually, even to that point, I used so one of the major areas of inspiration for the actual graphic design of Deliverance and the Council of the Fallen was Chip Theory Games' The Elder Scrolls: Betrayal of the Second Era. That was one of the projects that I thought was laid out so well that I really, not only in the actual graphic design and this section after this section and whatever, but the actual layout of the components and other things like that, I really, really liked. And there were reasons that I liked that, but I think there are certain companies that just do a really great job. And so what I would recommend is that you find a game in your niche. So if it's a Euro game, or if it's a, long chunky campaign game, and find campaigns that do very, very well in your niche, and um and
Mimic success.
yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with taking that as a blueprint and customizing it, making it your own. I would say that you'll lose out if you're like, well, I don't want to copy anyone, so I'm not even going to look at anything. And so um, let's get into the very first element, which is really the your basic project info. Includes a headline, it includes a subheading, and it includes an image, as well as you've got your funding goal and other things like that. Those are very, very important. What do you have to say about the headline and then the subheadline first?
So I think it's important to recognize that your headline impacts your URL. So if you get a typo in there at first, that's you're gonna have a typo in your project URL for the rest of your campaigns. You might need to just delete and recreate your project. So it's very important that you get that right. I know that you have Deliverance Council of the Fallen, and then you've added expansion and reprint. So you obviously did Council of the Fallen first and got the URL locked because that's what the URL is. And then later on, you added the qualifiers of expansion plus reprint.
Yes. Yeah, that is something that I think about regularly for SEO purposes, and also just sensibility. When somebody looks at a URL, they it should make sense. It should make them say, yes, if I click this, I should be in the right place. So ideally, that is going to be your game's name. And what you can do is you can add in as a headline your project's name. You don't have to be. It doesn't have to be the finished headline, but it's the the words are going to have that you use are going to have hyphens in between them without any of the no colons or other symbols. And so if you launch your launch your pre-launch page, that's a double use of the word launch, whatever. If you launch the pre-launch page, then your URL is kind of set in stone, and then you can still change the headline. So that's what I did. I started Deliverance Council of the Fallen, and then I adjusted it to Council of the Fallen expansion plus reprint. And so yeah.
And it's important that URL is clean because it looks more professional. It's bit, as you said, for SEO. People are going to be searching Deliverance Council of the Fallen. So if that's the actual URL, then it's just going to help it rank. So yeah, I think that's important. One thing I've noticed when examining some of the highest grossing projects of this year, in terms of this headline, is that if you have a well recognized brand, you should always lead with that brand. So, example, Brandon Sanderson's latest project, it actually opens with Brandon Sanderson's, and then it has the name of the product. So it's not product focused; it's actually brand focused. And there was other ones like I think it was Adventure Time was released this year, and I noticed that they put Adventure Time at the very front of the project title. So it's like the brand went first. But most people don't have a brand that's instantly recognizable. But I think putting your game name and then that colon, and then having a little descriptor. What I've also noticed is that a lot of projects then also at the end of the sort of short descriptor or like the subtitle of your actual game, they put what the game was. So it was, and usually it was abbreviation. So it'd be like TTRPG,
or the word board game.
Yeah, board game or trading card game. So the kind of what it was abbreviated at the end. So that's important. And then I also noticed that, and without exception, within that subtitle, what the game was also included there. So it'd be like the something video game or the so and so war game. So what it is should 100% be included in that subtitle.
Right. And the key is, it sounds like such basic information, but you have to think in terms of how your customer thinks. the first thing that people want to know is their goal is to position what your project is. The first thing they need to know is the answer to what is it. If I see minis and if I see a box and other things, then it's a, the image is showing me that it's a board game, but you should add some redundancy in there. So I should see the word, if it's a board game, I should see the word board game at least in your subtitle. If it's an RPG, I should see that somewhere. I should see what, if it's compatible with a certain edition of Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, I don't know. I should see that information as quickly as possible. This is only important to me if it's important to, as a marketer, if it's important to your audience. So you don't need to tell me everything unless the hardcore audience would want to know that. But the keys, I think, just you need to be able to explain what it is as quickly as possible, because there's going to come a time where, I'm open-minded to seeing whatever this is because it looks interesting. The title should intrigue me, and the subtitle should explain what this is. That's my view. So I
You
need,
also have to assume that a lot of people are probably going to discover your project for the first time on Kickstarter, and they'll have no context in which to understand what you're presenting. So being as clear as possible is super important. In fact, Andrew, you probably know off the top of your head how many people, because you did a survey,
yeah,
said that they found Deliverance, this expansion,
yeah.
via Kickstarter itself.
Yeah, we had so in fact this has changed over the years. So when we ran our first project, we had about 20%, it was like 19% of the people that backed us or that filled out the survey, and there were over 400. So we had over 15% of our backers fill out that survey. And this most recent Kickstarter, we did a survey, and that number was no exception. We had like 3,300 and change backers, and we had 638 people that filled out the form, and it's it was a real surprise. 26% of the people that filled out that form said they found us first on Kickstarter.
Well, so yeah, a quarter.
Yeah.
So that's
And we were
you got to keep that
projects
in
we
mind.
love and whatnot. I'm even more convinced that the organic market is on Kickstarter, because our first project, we did not earn project we love. We still earned about 19% of the people that found us said they found us first through Kickstarter. So
So yeah, that's something to certainly keep in mind.
mhm.
Great. So yeah, we've covered the title and the subtitle. Maybe another thing to kind of include in the subtitle, it's really important, I think, in the subtitle, maybe even the headline, to use phrases or terms that have done really well during your pre-marketing. In Facebook, you're able to see the click-through rate, and that's the indicator of interest. So you want to examine that link click-through rate, and you want to use whatever's generating those clicks and the high click-through rate as the basis to shape overall your entire page, because there might be certain phrases or terminology or even a particular playable character that you've run ads for that people respond to really well. You want to feature that then accordingly on your page. But I do know that one thing that we did for Deliverance is that we in terms of the advertising campaign, the term Angelic Warfare board game performed exceptionally well. So you'll notice on the Deliverance Council of the Fallen expansion page that in the subtitle we have the award-winning Angelic Warfare board game. We include that term, and that was no accident. That was specifically because we had done a lot of testing via pre-marketing ads to work out that term really caught people's attention.
Yeah, and that's something that we, like you said, had a lot of experience with, but it positions our product. So what ads should teach you when you run the ads, if you examine what the results are, the things that perform better are typically the things that like hook people. And we found, and if you can boil down your hook into as few words as possible, it's going to get tighter and more impactful. And so for us, the Angelic Warfare board game, we did like the Demon Slaying board game, the game of spiritual warfare.
We did like the
Lots of
metaphysical
names.
warfare board game, the hyperdimensional warfare. We tried loads of
We
different
tried
ones.
all the things, but yeah, Angelic Warfare kind of stuck. And So yeah, it definitely was a if you can position yourself very, very quickly so that a backer can understand what it is, you make a more compelling case for the right people to jump on your project. Also, involved in this kind of above the fold area, you've got the project image and video as well, but the image should be supporting whatever the headline and subheadline is. I should be able to see again, what is it? If I don't see a box, then I don't think it's a board game. There are so many people that when they actually see my art, they think it's a video game. And
Mm-hmm.
so I need to show them that there's a square box with this art on it. So they see, this is a board game. So we actually showed miniatures in the image and other things too. But then there are other very important pieces of the puzzle that prospective backers will want to know. One of them is the player count, how long it takes to play, the age range, and also like regions. Are you going to ship to the European Union primarily? For us, we had over 12% of our people were from the EU, and so having and that doesn't include the UK. That was separate. It's like 6%, but having the EU friendly and the UK logo and the Australia logo and whatnot, those things are valuable for the right people. You want those people to know, yes, they do ship. So they're looking into this awesome thing, but they're not sure if it's even able to be shipped to them. But if they see this logo very quickly, then that's like a box checked. That they're going to be like, okay, I know that this project can ship to me, so now I'm going to actually invest some more time into absorbing information. Whereas if they don't see that, they might scroll for a little while, but they're like, this might just be forbidden fruit where I won't ever have access to this. And so it's one of the more important things I think on an image to show the regions that you ship to. And then of course you want to in my opinion you should show the game in action. I think that I've seen lots of these images over the years where you have and I think we did this for our first campaign, and I think it was a mistake where you have all the products, like all the stuff, all the miniatures, all the map tiles, all the characters laid out in a really fun looking way. I actually think it's more impactful as a general rule if you can, unless you have like some really weird looking interesting components shape that just interests people. I think that it's more impactful if you show a game in progress as a part of your the cover, or kind of that featured image.
One interesting thing as well is that if you do look at the Deliverance page and you see this game spread, you'll notice that the angel miniatures are on this spread. Now, originally, you didn't have the angel miniatures; you had the standees,
Right.
and it was someone in the community that asked, when you play the game, do you play with the miniature angel miniatures, you play with the standees or the acrylic standees? And overwhelmingly people played with the miniatures. So
Mm-hmm.
there's an example of like using your community or even using a survey to help
Yep.
craft your page. And then we adjusted these images accordingly. It's like, okay, well, it's nice to show off the pretty art on the standee,
Mm-hmm.
but most people when they play this game use the miniatures, so we should demonstrate the game with the miniatures.
Right. And again, that is it seems like that would be common sense. And in fact, there's I hear so often, oh, you got to make a game with miniatures. Miniatures make more money. That people have been saying that for a long time, and I don't think it's true anymore. It is yes, you'll make more money because your product's going to be more expensive, and if people are buying, people are paying more, it doesn't make it more profitable. It just sometimes like hunks of plastic are actually not very attractive nowadays, as long as they're appropriate and well placed. I think that if it's a fit for what it is that you're selling, um it can be a good thing. But yeah, I think showing them in action is better than just showing them static. And we did static miniatures. I had 5 of them that I displayed. We actually have 9 of them in the box. But I think if I were to go back, I'd probably keep the miniatures in action and then remove the static ones. And maybe I'd put something else there instead, or maybe nothing. Maybe I would just give the image a little more room to breathe. Um, Oftentimes less is more. where you're
Yeah.
not showing every single thing in the box, but you're showing enough to intrigue the person and support again the headline and subheadline. You know.
Yeah, well, if you just look at a Brandon Sanderson's Cosme RPG, that's very simple. It's just the two books, the logo, and sort of like a starry background. That's
Mhm.
it. So,
Yep.
again, looking at the sort of highest funded projects on Kickstarter through tabletop analytics is a good way to sort of see what
Mhm.
others are doing
Yeah.
and maybe trying to replicate that success. I do
Right.
know that Galactic Cruise, to some success, included the actual price of their standard pledge,
Yep.
and I know that that worked quite well in terms of building that pre-launch following. So that as before they even launched, this was before Kickstarter introduced the feature where you could include more images and information below the
Mhm.
pre-launch page. So it was very vital that you optimize that image as much as possible. So they actually put the base pledge price on the image itself, and I thought that was a
Yep.
very clever use of that space. And I think it actually did it was quite a convincing way to get people to follow because it was an attractive price for such a impressive looking game.
Yep. Yeah, I think that that's can be of great benefit. It is something that positions you, not necessarily what is it, but can I afford this? And so I think that that's a fine thing to do. I decided not to do that on our product because this particular campaign that we did was an expansion, and so the expansion's 79, but then the base game is 89. And if you are coming in as a new person, you're going to spend, like $160 or whatever, to get both. And so it's not it didn't work for us. But I do think that if you have a single game, and if people want to just buy the game, show the price for the game. If you've got cosmetic upgrades or you've got expansions or whatever, people might just want the game. So it's an option to include. Eventually, I so the above the fold section, it is going to be, with the image and then your title and whatnot, that is going to be on Kickstarter, and people like winners. So I think that it's a good thing to put a banner on your, a banner that kind of calls out something special. Some people say funded in 9 seconds, and or whatever, funded in 1 hour, and then others call out the number of stretch goals, which is actually what we chose to do. Other people will call out the percent funding. Or maybe they'll call out Kickstarter exclusive or something like that. I do think a banner can help position you as a winner, like a winning project. When I have $100 to spend and there are 5 projects before me that I'm considering, the first one I'll probably click on is the one with the banner, the highest funding goal, the highest funding percentage, or highest funding dollar total, most number of backers. But the banner call out can show me something that I might not have seen, just by looking at the dollar funding amount and whatnot. And for Deliverance, that was the number of stretch goals that we unlocked. So over 50 stretch goals unlocked. So 50 plus stretch goals unlocked was how I worded it. But I actually think that really helped me. Whereas before it was like, our first campaign we did like funded in 9 minutes. That didn't really mean a whole lot. I thought it was really cool, but to a backer that doesn't know who you are, that doesn't really mean as much as you think it does. But the amount of stretch goals unlocked is meaningful.
Yeah, I
um,
feel as well. A lot of people suspect that there's sort of deflated
mhm,
funding goals that are artificially low, and then therefore people can say funded in 10 seconds or whatever.
right.
So I think they're a bit more suspicious of it. What I've noticed with the sort of last 48-hour ads that we run for our clients, it's more meaningful not to say how much money is being raised or how quickly it's being raised, but how many backers have
Mhm,
joined. And I think that's a really important metric for people because it's like, hey, there's lots
yep.
of people checking this out. There's, over 3,000 backers. That's a very impressive number of people. It's like
Yep.
it's like a
Yeah,
stadium of
that's
people. So
absolutely.
saying things like that over so many backers is a great way to say, oh, maybe I should check this out because so many people have backed this. And I think that's a far more meaningful metric to sort of use in your ads, maybe even on your page, than some arbitrary funding goal that's been, achieved
Yeah.
in an arbitrary amount of time.
Yeah. That's social proof. Social proof is a
Mhm.
powerful, powerful thing. So then if you scroll down below this section, you get to the beginning of your story. You get into so you see your so now before we even get into the story, there's something else that a lot of people will miss, or rather maybe not see as important, that I think is very important. If your creator name should say, maybe it's your first project, and it'll say one created, how many projects have you backed?
Hmm.
At the moment, I have backed 240 projects, which I have a problem. I need to go to Kickstarter Anonymous, but that doesn't include my GameFound projects. That's Kickstarter alone. And it shows that I have some street cred in this industry. The one of the biggest mistakes that you can make as a new creator is one created, zero backed. That
Mhm.
shows me that you have no idea what you're doing in this industry, and I should not trust you. Now, that's not always the case, because there are some people that may have an excellent following somewhere else, and they create a company and they've got a big following, and they make $1 million and it's one created, zero backed. I still think that they would do better if they back at least 10 projects, and in fact, I
Mhm.
think that you could go spend $20 and back 20 different projects, $1 at a time, and you would look so much better. Just a stat that looks like, okay, this person at least might be one of us, as a fellow crowdfunding consumer. I am I'm always, and I'm a super backer. Like, I'm turned off by creators that do not have other projects that they have backed, because it shows me not only that you're not supporting the industry and whatnot. That's not really that influential on me. What's more impactful is, like, you don't know how this works. I don't
Mhm.
think you know how this works if you haven't at least followed projects and seen a project's delivery cycle and whatnot. Like, you don't know how this works. Is my gut, and so I think that's actually quite important. Um,
Yeah, and then even if that $20 is an investment in terms of researching and studying what others do, so you're going to be getting their updates. You might
yep,
even counter some of the problems they run into, and that can give you sort of a forewarning of issues that you might run into.
yep.
So it's important just in terms of your education to back those projects, read the updates, see how they're crafting their updates, what questions are they asking, and study, take notes.
Yep, absolutely. Um, so then when you scroll down and you get to the top of the story section, this is actually one area. If you're looking at the Deliverance page, it kind of deviates, because we have after a while, when you're running a live campaign, your story, you need to talk to the people that are returning as much as you need to talk to new people. But on day one, and even in your pre-marketing and whatnot, you want to position again, what is this? So if you look at my story, so we've got a thank you backers, we've got our social communities and other things in our final stretch goals we did, new angels that we put out, and that was something that we did over time. But then below that, we have this quick overview, like this. If you're looking at our page on the left hand side, you've got these breadcrumbs. Hit the quick link menu button, and then you're going to see the very top of our page on day one. Um, the very first thing that I wrote, that I think this is so important: give me the hook of your game in 6 words or less. I think 6 words is a solid number of words that will help me understand what it is. Two of them should be board game. Maybe one of them should be RPG, TTRPG, whatever. You have 4 to 5 other words that you can tell me what this is. If you cannot explain to me in one short phrase what the hook of your game is, it doesn't ruin everything, but if you get it right, it really positions you well. And I want to say, actually, one of the first projects that was absolutely the best, the best hook spoken in the shortest amount of words, was Modifius's Homeworld Fleet Command. That was at the time, we marketed that one, and it made a good amount of money. But they had large scale, fast paced fleet battles. That was like their hook. It told me what the game was, what I should like, what experience I should expect, and they had a some sci-fi ships that were fighting each other in this image. and it just all the information supported. Yeah, that looks awesome. If I was very into, like, first of all, if you know what Homeworld is and you wanted that, then great. But there are so many people, because that is an IP, but there are so many people, like myself included, I didn't even know Homeworld was a video game IP until obviously Modifius is like, hey, you should market our thing, right?
You never played Homeworld?
Nope, never played
Oh, it's a
Homeworld.
good game. You should play it.
Yeah. So I mean, I figured it was something like Eve Online or whatever. I was just like, okay, but
It's like a
yeah,
3-dimensional real-time strategy game, RTS.
that's
So if
awesome.
you like StarCraft, you'll like Homeworld.
Yeah, I definitely like games like StarCraft and Warcraft 3 in particular. So, but yeah, so then um, that descriptor is so important because, again, you're positioning yourself. And so if you were to start with like a wall of text, like a wall of story text, like the animal, things are not well in the kingdom of Nod. All the animals are going crazy and we don't understand why. It's like, I don't have any context as a prospective backer reading that as to why that matters to me. I need context for everything that I'm looking at. And there are other campaigns. I want to call them out. I want to say the bad things about these pages that I've seen. There's so many that come to mind, but we don't like talking negatively about very particular campaign pages, whatever. But there's one particular page that I thought, so it's a creator that has done lots and lots of campaigns. They raise $500,000 to $1 million every single campaign that they've done. You might think that that's very successful, but to them, that's normal. So what I would do as a marketer is I'd come in and say, how can we make this better? One of the biggest problems with their campaigns are that they are marketing to their audience that already know their stuff, which is great, except you don't get any new people, and you're going to. So I actually went through this campaign, which had hordes and hordes of miniatures and other things like that. And I didn't actually know until I got 3/4 the way through the page what the game, what it was. It's like, is it cooperative? Is it competitive? Is it like an arena battle thing? Is it like a story driven campaign thing that's like narrative? I had to scroll through massive, massive amounts of content before I could actually even contextualize what it is I'm looking at. It's like, I don't know what this game is. It's got hunks of beautiful looking plastic miniatures, and I still don't know what it is. And I'm 3/4 of the way through the page. It's like, I, as a backer, would never make it that far if I didn't know what the thing was. I'm just a marketing nerd that is looking for research, and I'm like, this page is so terrible. They probably spent a ton of money on this page, and they did not think at all about the marketing. It was just like, I am disappointed. The cat meme, that was my face. So grumpy cat.
Yes, and
So
then you also notice here that we lead with the sort of the box cover art, the main angels, and we did lead with Damascus here, and Damascus he's like this big sort of wrestler angel, and we even in the advertising we led with him because he performed quite well.
Yep.
And also we're kind of tapping into our target market here. I know that I think Asmongold called World or Warcraft used to be about big sweaty men hitting each other. It's like, and we want to tap into the Warcraft audience, so we want to lead with a big sweaty man who's going to be wresting some darkness down.
Who does kind of look
So,
like a dwarf, doesn't he?
yeah, you can see him wrestling some things. And then again, we come down to the spread. Again, we have the miniatures that we're highlighting. We didn't use the standees here. And then your little thematic kind of hook to get people really interested in. Basically, we're trying to answer in the next section is, who am I, what am I doing, and how do I win, or why does it matter?
Why should I care? Yeah.
Why should I care? Yep. And then underneath that, we then have the player count, so the the hours to play, and the recommended age.
Yep. I would say that this amount of scrolling, which if I were to go to the very top, I scroll once, I get about, if it was just, the original way that we set it up, where the this image is at the very top. If I scroll once, I get to the Angelic Warfare board game Returns, which is the title that we used for our hook. And then I scroll again and I get to the thematic flavor text. Fallbrook is doomed. This town of Fallbrook is, etc. and it's got certain things that are really, really call out, certain pieces of the story. Falbrick is doomed, the Council of the Fallen, and his guardian angels are much, much larger than normal, where, people generally, like, this principle applies overall. Like, anytime you write text, people are not going to read text, they're going to scan it. So
Mhm.
when they become very interested, for example, let's say Falbrick is doomed is something that hooks them, they will then read. So, Falbrick is doomed is like a big title. It's the text is much larger, and then if they're interested in that, it's like, what is Falbrick? Why is Falbrick doomed? Um, the next two short paragraphs explain why, but then I actually call out the Council of the Fallen as very, very large text, which is, generally why Falbrick is doomed. And, then there you are, one of his guardian angels. This guy's who's guardian angels. So, um, it gives you context for the story. You don't have to actually read all of the text and ingest all of it. That's an important difference. I can read all of it, but I might not commit it to memory. But there are certain things that I think are very important that I want to call out. And so this is really my one scroll test. So you're at the top of a Kickstarter page and you get one scroll. In that one scroll, I need to know what this is. If I
Mhm.
don't know what it is, and by the way, I also need to know the hook. If I need to know what it is and why it's awesome. So there are a couple of different ways to do that. One of the ways that we talked about is with text. So like I used the Angelic Warfare board game returns. So that's the hook. If you're not interested in Angelic Warfare or board games, then get out. Is kind of what I'm saying. And I want to talk to those people that are interested in those things. And then after that, you've got, so that's my major message, if you will call it that. I also have room for several minor messages that are not maybe even explained in words. One of them is the art conveys a very particular
Mhm.
mood and message, and that's something that you need to leverage art, especially with board games. They're so beautiful. All the art that you get to use, you really get to show um, a lot of things, and I think um, that mood is a minor message that you like. What is the experience like when I play this? And I want, in Deliverance, I want you to feel like this epically powerful angel that is nearly overwhelmed by hordes of darkness and just on the verge of defeat. So it shouldn't look like, oh, we're angels and we're whipping and it's easy. It should look like we're epic angels and I don't know if we're going to survive. That's the feeling that I want you to have when you play. And so the art and the layout, that's kind of a minor message I want to showcase. And then also another minor message is just shown in the way that the game is laid out. You've got one character, you fight and you level up and you're battling against demons on a grid. And so if you like those types of games, this might be for you. And there are some interesting twists that you might not understand, which could even inspire you to read further. But so those are my thoughts. Any thoughts on what I shared?
Yeah, well, I also think in terms of the spread that you have laid out, you can very clearly see that there's a character card there, and you see talents. So instantly you know that okay, this is the game that has some type of talent system. Maybe there's a player progression leveling up system. You can see grids on. So okay, so there's some type of grid based combat. You also can see like a board at the back with some of monsters, and so okay, maybe this is the initiative track and things. So just by looking at the picture, the layout, you can really start piecing together what the game is about and some of the mechanics in the game that might be intriguing to various people. And
Right.
I actually just tested this on my phone. So by doing a 3 scroll test, I got to the area where it says play an epic angel. So after 3 scrolls, assuming that the where the original top of the page was being, because you've added stuff
Mhm.
since then, but assuming that the top of the page is where it used to be, after 3 scrolls, I got to play as an epic angel, which is a good place to be because it's like, okay, now I can like investigate these angels that I can play, and that's what is really drawing me
Mhm.
into this game.
Yep, absolutely. And then there's one other thing I think actually tangents off of what you just said, which is people will stop and read what it is that you have put there. Meaning, they actually will zoom in on their phone. Like, yeah, I don't know if you did this or do this with other projects, but a lot of people will actually zoom in and read your card's text. So if the images, if the cards, or if the components are small enough that it gets really grainy and I can't actually make out the text, that's a negative. So a lot of the time that happens when the graphic design kind of swallows the game components, where you've got lots of cool looking color and graphic design and whatnot, but then your actual game components are very small. That's a mistake. You need to have your game components large enough that that somebody that's motivated enough can actually read the text. Um, and in certain places it might be a little small, but you can really, like, for example, you mentioned that play an epic angel. You can actually zoom in and read Damask, almost his entire card, because
Mhm.
it's large enough. Especially on mobile, you can do that, and then desktop you can zoom in as well, and you should be able to generally read the text that's in front of you.
Great. So we have the kind of beginning section we've just discussed, and then after that, you really have like your feature bullet. It's like these are the features. These are like the top things,
Yep.
and you chose. And the reason that you highlighted these particular things we're about to cover, these features, is that you surveyed your audience and you asked them what you want to see in a deliverance expansion, and pretty much everything they said you've now included in the section.
Yes.
So you featured here like I know the major thing overwhelmingly people wanted in the game was more playable angels. They want to
Mhm.
play different, and that's the first thing you lead with. 9 new playable angels.
Yep.
And the other thing was they wanted better. They wanted more armor and more abilities. And the next thing you
Mhm.
have is armor and abilities. So you're giving people what they want. And the next thing people wanted was more enemy types, and that you have all these big pictures of new enemy types. So you're kind of you're giving features,
Mhm.
but it's very intentional. You've used a lot of data and information from your previous campaign,
Yep.
and maybe you don't have a previous campaign, but you might have playtesters. You said, "Oh, I really like this element of the game." So maybe I really like the card
Mhm.
drafting system you have. So you could say, you know, dynamic card drafting system, and have a
Mhm.
way of communicating that somehow.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
thinking of what makes your project unique and what people get them excited about your game,
Yep.
featuring it underneath straight away is the next part of this template.
Yeah, and I guess the way that I would explain the next section. So I actually did. So I took a, I guess you could call it a risk. Crowdfunding is a risk in general, but the way that I laid it out, there was this little thing that I did in between, and I think I like how it works. In fact, I do like this, and I would recommend it after seeing other reviewers and how they look at the page and whatnot. um After that initial, like, what is it, what's the hook, like the one, or scroll test thing, with a little bit of a story and like age range, player count, I put this section in that is purely text, that's like, here are the bullet points of why you would like this. If you like this, you would like Deliverance. If there's a one-shot skirmish mode and a challenging story-driven campaign. Setup is 10 minutes. It's got deep customization with dynamic characters and etc. There are um let's see, 6 bullet points that I put together that tighten up the entirety of everything that you're gonna learn by scrolling through the page, into and just distill it down into the simplest, like, here's the cliff notes, or here's the spark notes, of what this page will attempt to how it will attempt to sell you. um, and what I found is that there were reviewers that actually would that would review, that I sent copies of the game to, and they actually pulled this information, from this information, or they there were other people that would review the page. A lot of people, after Deliverance exploded and did well, it got a bunch of people to look at it, and this was something that they would always stop and be like, oh, okay, so it's like a one shot skirmish. Oh, but it also has a campaign. Oh, the setup is quick. Oh, there's deep customization and looks like some sort of like role playing game type, elements, and etc. And oh, free quarterly content. I didn't know that. And so you may not have very much time to explain yourself to people like that, to reviewers or to people looking at your page. But this was something that I think did well for us. So, and then I, was a little tongue in cheek, enough text to the fancy images. Um, and yeah, so the next section after that, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, by the way.
Yeah, well,
What did you think about that?
I remember when our company reviewed this. I know you kind of sent it to us to draft. This was actually the section I told you to remove because like, oh, it's too
Well,
much text. It's too up. This is too high up the page. But yeah, I see why you did it, and it is interesting. Um, I think maybe doing this is going to be interesting to see if we could try and make it even less wordy because I think at this time, like I think all
mhm.
your bold text is super good, and I wonder how people would have responded if it was just bullet points with that bold text.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it was nice that you included a little introduction. Hey, this is who I am, and here's the little intro.
Yeah, I think that I agree with you. I think that one of the mistakes I made is that this did not have enough time to bake in the oven. It was a little half baked. Overall, it was a very positive thing for the campaign, but I actually think that it could be a much more powerful thing if done. If I had more time to fully bake this idea. I literally put this thing together after the page was finished and the campaign was about to go live. I think it was the
Yeah.
day before, 2 days before, something like that. I put this in there and was like, what do you think about this, guys? Like, kind of
Yeah, because you also
nervous.
have Delivers back Andrew Lowen here, and people might not know who Andrew Lowen is. So having
Yeah.
maybe in the future having a picture of yourself saying game designer or something, with like a picture
Yeah.
of you holding the box or something.
But
Um,
even maybe that's just like too much image. The people don't care about
yes,
me,
yeah, they don't care about
but
you.
it's all
Yeah,
about the game at this point, right? And so
yeah,
yeah, it's like how could we cut down on this section is one thing I'd think about. But then after that, the call outs, what I call the quick overview, it's we kind of do the same thing with our landing pages. When we put together a landing page for like pre-marketing, we always explain to players how the game plays, like how it feels when the game is played, not
mhm,
necessarily the steps, but like step 1, play an epic angel, step 2, customize your character, step 3, battle against the forces of darkness, can you overcome. um it's kind of how it feels, how it should feel, but not how turn order goes you know
mhm.
um
More
and
thematic.
yeah, exactly, more thematic. And for me, one of the things that was like, I wish I could have tightened this section up. In fact, if it could have been like, if each of these sections could have been like 2 inches tall, and the width of the Kickstarter landing page, I would have preferred that. However, um, we went with very large images and like a lot of art. We have tons of art in this game, all over the place, and the one of the things is that one of the hooks of Deliverance is the art, is the quality of the art and the awesome, the way that everything looks and whatnot. And so that is something that you get to ingest just more of it. And so that's why we decided to go with longer sections. Each section is basically a screen length long. It's like an entire cell phone with length tall, maybe a little taller than that, and has game components in like one bullet point each, each image cluster. But I was originally inspired by, I want to say there was a Sagrada, um it was some sort of like Gods and something or other. It was an expansion, like a standalone expansion for a game called Sagrada, that they did a really good job telling people what the game did well. And also, and those were 4 little slides that were really short. And then another 4 slides that told people what was new and different about this particular game, which I think makes sense if you're doing an expansion. So I'm doing an expansion, but I handled it a little bit differently. I'm like, the first game came out, but this is going to be a lot of people's first exposure to this game. It's not that well known, and so um, I just kind of went with using the images were like the new content and the expansion content you got to see in the new images, but the what does it feel like, the thematic, how does it feel like when you play it, that is just kind of included by itself rather than what's different, because really nothing's different about Deliverance. It's like more of what you love. There are some things that are, but
one thing you also chose to do is you sprinkled review quotes throughout the page, and uh, I like this. I like using review quotes to break up sections.
Mhm,
So in between, if you got basically changing gears, to have a review quote there, and
mhm.
rather than having them all at the bottom, like some people do, they just have them all at the bottom near the kind of review videos and things. But I do like the idea of peppering them through as like a bit of a content break, and then obviously you want to have maybe the most famous reviewers at the top. Who
Mhm.
I know you open here with Alex Radcliffe, and you've got others here sprinkled around, so that's worth mentioning. And then sort of you lead after that with social proof. You have these accolades and awards that this is an award-winning game. You basically have all the kind of Board Game Geek nominations. You have the Board Game Geek rating. You have seals by different influencers that it's won awards and been approved and highlighted in different areas. So I think that's
Mhm.
worthwhile having.
Yeah, social proof is so important. I think that it should not be limited to the reviewers and testimonials section or whatever. You should have that sprinkled throughout. The one thing that I would change is I would like to include people's faces. The reviewer's actual face would be something that, or just like a bust of them, like from shoulders up or whatever. I think that there's value in that rather than in their company logo. But I do think that that's very helpful. It kind of adds a little bit more proof, like if I'm playing, saying there's robust character customization, the next quote is, you could play this game a dozen times and still not see all that a single angel has to offer, let alone the whole host of angels at your disposal. That's like a supporting documentation to my statement that I made,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's kind of how I look at reviewer quotes, is more like supporting documentation to a statement that you make. You can always use reviewer quotes and cherry pick the ones that make your game look awesome. This is my favorite X genre game now. That's really great. But if it's like random BGG user, it's just not quite as, there's not as much oomph behind it. But if it was something specific, I think the more specific, the more terrific. And then you can use those in the correct sections, for maximum impact.
So I think the rest of the page, we can sort of maybe quickly summarize what they are. We
Yeah.
don't have to spend a ton of great deal of time. But after that, you move into a how to play section. And this is a very quick 3-step how to play game. It's more thematic. And you use GIFs here to highlight it. And I know one thing that we really made an emphasis of this campaign. We wanted to have we want to have photography. We wanted real imagery, not 3D generated imagery. So
Right.
we really wanted to use this as another little space to show off the actual components of the game and the beautiful art that the game has. Let it speak for itself. So you'll notice a lot of the GIFs here are created by Antlab Games. They very kindly did this for us, and I think it looks great. You kind of have like this time lapse of components being laid on the table of like your character progressing and leveling up, which is super cool. And you have how the game looks when you actually play it. Moving of components and the destroying of demons and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that the how to play section is really, really important. A lot of the time, people put that after all their pledge levels and all, a lot of the add-ons and everything like that. I think now, after doing so many campaigns, I think that it's important to put your how to play first
Mm-hmm.
before the pledge tiers. And the reason for that, in my opinion, it's something that I see others doing it differently all the time, but in my opinion, it adds context to everything else. So really, it's all about context. It's like, okay, you're saying this game is good. Here are the little pieces of the hooks of the game, some social proof that says it's good. Well, let's actually see the game, rather than, I think that's more important than seeing the components of the game, because if I actually see the game and kind of how it plays, I'll have more it'll make more sense when it's like 9 angels. It's like, oh, that's actually a lot of content. So you get to choose, anyway. So I think that the gifts, they're very valuable in this place. The first campaign I saw that did this, I backed a game called Iridia, The Paths We Dare Tread. I can't remember the company's name off the top of my head, but they also did some other really great games. They actually put the how to play and how the game works almost toward like really close to the top of the page. And as a backer, again, you know that you want to be a backer of campaigns. If you go to Kickstarter, you want to have backed campaigns so that you have this type of experience to draw from, like I am right now. You know, this game Iridia, I really appreciated seeing so much about the actual game, and like how the combat system worked, and how the, you know, like if you you know, how the exploration worked, what the game generally, like what the gameplay loop was like. Then after that, I was like kind of in I just had a really great time just scrolling through. It was like a reward when I got to the pledge levels. It's like, man, I get to scroll through and see all this cool stuff, and like I now have context for why this is great. You know, why a bow staff is different than a like a bow and arrow that is different than a sword or an axe. It's like, oh well, the bow staff attacks from the top, and then the sword attacks like just anywhere, and or the, I'm sorry, the bow and arrow attacks anywhere, and that's why those two things are different. But I have context for that inside my head because I just read your how to play section, you know, and you know how the actual gameplay works with gifs and whatnot. So that's my current stance on that, and why I put how to play before the rest. So I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think moving it higher up at the top is pertinent.
Mhm.
So then moving on, then you have the what's in the box. Essentially,
Mhm.
you have these different pledges, and I think the important thing here is you highlight the price.
Yes.
It's also super important that you have it in United States dollars. Don't if you're
Mhm.
you know if you're in the UK and you have it in pounds. You know, a lot of Americans don't know how to convert pounds into
Mhm.
dollars, but I
Yep.
think a lot of people in the UK know how to convert dollars roughly into pounds. So, and
Mhm.
that's for any other European country. The United States dollars are just the benchmark that everyone is able to reference.
Yep.
So don't ever have it in your local currency. This includes Australian dollars. You know,
Mhm.
so you always want it in US dollars. Most of your backers are coming from the US anyway, and you know I don't think many people in the US kind of know the conversion rate of dollars to euros or
Right.
dollars to pounds.
Americans are the most ignorant of backers sometimes. You know, I think that it's been many of our campaigns that we've run where we have, you know, people in Australia or in the UK or EU, you know, using euro or pound sterling, or you know, Australian dollars or even Canadian dollars. It's like it looks like it's very expensive if, you know, it's 79 US dollars. Convert that to Australian dollars, that could be like, I don't know. Um, let me look actually. So every dollar in the US equals $1.55 Australian. So $79 is $122 in Australia. And that to an American is like, dude, $120 for this is a lot. Now,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had experiences where, you know, people have kind of failed at launch, and that's one of the big things that we point to is like, I think a lot of people had the brakes put on at the price. And what you could have done is you could have said 79 USD, and then in smaller text you can have, you know, whatever 120, approximately 120 Australian. You know, and so, or maybe 120 Australian dollars, approximately $79 USD. And that would be very helpful to somebody. You know, you're going to have 65 to 85% of your audience is going to be from the US.
Mm-hmm.
So your pricing should definitely prioritize the US. Absolutely, especially as an international backer. Um,
Great, yeah. So that's quite self-explanatory in terms of just outlining what's in the box. So let's quickly move on to the next section, which I suppose if you include the add-ons there, you have a retail pledge. Then we get into more of I suppose, a thematic introduction to each angel. So
mhm,
a sort of who they are, what they look like, maybe what some of their competencies are. I think this is another example where you can actually zoom in and read the character sheet
mhm,
in the game. So that's important, just highlighting one of the unique features. And then you had it's just kind of where your stretch goals are incorporated into this because you revealed more playable angels throughout the
mhm.
campaign. And then you have your stretch goals. So, and you had a lot of stretch goals for this
Yep.
campaign. So maybe you want to just briefly talk about what was the reason behind having so many stretch goals, and
Mhm.
yeah, because you're
So
scrolling for quite a while to get through all those stretch goals.
definitely, definitely. And that's when, you know, after you hook people, they will scroll. You know, people that return, they'll go to the stretch goal section. By the way, one thing we didn't really talk about, but is very important, are breadcrumbs. Kickstarter and GameFound both do them. On the left-hand side, you'll see the various elements. Like I can go right to the how to play section, or I can go right to the retailer pledge. By the way, retailers will hit Control F and then type the word retail. And if it's not found on your page, you will lose out on retail pledges. So make sure that your retailer pledge isn't just a picture, but you actually have text that they can hit Control F that on the internet browser that will find stuff. So anyway, yeah, so all the pledge tiers, I laid them out. My style was the kind of the Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era. I loved how they did them. Really, really large images, not including all the components. That was a decision that we made. Like we included a sampling of components, so that you saw all the types of components and that it looked like a lot. And at the same time, the images had to be really large. I wanted descriptions for each thing, like each major thing. And so anyway, that was important to me. And then so you get into like after all the pledge tiers, I talk about the angels. So this is more almost like a celebration of what this thing is. If you want to get more details, so a lot of people will go into like the lore of their world or their characters or whatever. So that's kind of the celebration of what it is. But then you get into, like you said, stretch goals. I have evolved my opinion on stretch goals, but one thing that has remained consistent that I feel so wholeheartedly, passionate about is you need to have stretch goals. There are outliers, like for example, Frosthaven didn't have stretch goals. They had things that they were adding. They did it in a different way, but I think stretch goals, monetary stretch goals, are very, very valuable because people will come back to the campaign and say, "Oh, we knocked 2 more down. I'm excited that we get these 2." Yeah, maybe you always ask for a manufacturing quote with all the components so you know how much it's going to cost at the end of the day with every stretch goal unlocked. But it is a game. It's sometimes a stupid game. Like, oh, I added 2 cards. It doesn't really increase my manufacturing cost to add 2 cards, but it's really exciting to backers when they get to see you added 2 cards. That's great. My money is actually earning something for me now, and I feel happy that I'm pledging to this, this campaign. It's like I'm betting on a racehorse, and I'm betting on a winner because we keep winning these stretch goals. That's a real thing. That is not just it's not just FOMO. It will retain backers that would have canceled otherwise. It will cause people to jump into your campaign that wouldn't have jumped in otherwise because your campaign knocked down 9 stretch goals so far or whatever. It's a big deal. So yeah, they scroll a long way. And I did make some changes this time. I decided that so our first campaign, we had our characters, that were tied to monetary stretch goals, and there were very large gaps. Like we had like a $5,000 for a couple of cards, and then it'd be like $15,000 to get the next angel, or 18,000. And in the middle of a campaign, especially on our first one, $18,000 took like a week to earn, and it started to make backers feel like, oh, I don't know if we're going to actually unlock all these angels. It's so far to get to the next one, and people would actually they would stop engaging, and they would start to actually kind of freak out a little bit. Yeah, they would be disparaged. Yeah, they'd despair. So what we decided to do was we decided to have unlocks and stretch goals. So what I told everybody was that we're one single card it costs $2,500, or that's the stretch goal. That's quite a lot for a single mini sized card, not even poker sized card. And then 2 cards are going to be like $6,000 or so to add, and that is a very high number. But what we decided to do is we decided to have a weekly angel reveal, which has a plastic miniature, a big character card, 15 angel talents, and that's like a really large add to the game. It's like the biggest content addition to the game. And so instead of saying like, oh, we're going to tie that to monetary values, we said every Thursday we're going to reveal another one, and come back every Thursday and you get to see what it is. And that was very, very exciting to people.
Mhm.
There was also none of the downside of like, oh no, it's going to be forever until we actually get to this next one. And there was all the upside of like, wow, we unlocked this thing. I'm so excited. This is my new favorite character, that kind of thing. We had a lot of that happening. And then at the same time, people got to be like, oh, we unlocked another treasure. We knocked down 4 more stretch goals. This campaign's smashing it. And my stretch goals are like $2,500 to $5,000, $6,000 apart. And people are really happy, really happy. So that's kind of how I worked with my stretch goals.
It also allowed you to create some unique and new ones. Like I know your very last stretch goal here is Andrew's whistle track, which is I think is actually a meme I started because I got a sneak preview of like a little documentary that was made about the soundtrack for Deliverance, and it's someone that I think it's Adam, one of your designers, said that oh yeah, Andrew's an amazing whistler. So during the launch party, I was like, while we're waiting, I was like, Andrew, whistle for us in the comments, kind of trolling you a little bit, and everyone's like, whistle? Why whistle? And it kind of created a snowball effect, and that through the campaign it became a thing that you're this expert whistler, and you incorporated that in the stretch goal, which I think is a really great way of kind of engaging your community and kind of having an internal kind of culture, internal meme that you can leverage. So it's fun that you could actually incorporate that as a stretch goal.
Yep, absolutely. That was a really funny thing. People were like, what should we do when we pass our, the amount the last campaign raised? And then somebody was like, and Andrew needs to record a track, a video of him whistling. I was like,
It's really
okay.
impressive, yeah, especially Lord of the Rings.
Yep, that's like I whistle constantly all the time.
I would
under my
hike with
breath.
you just to go to like a mountain so you could like whistle and just like
Yep.
hear it like echo across the mountains.
Dude, I could make avalanches happen. I could make you cry. I could make you laugh. I could, it's like,
Summon
I don't know.
Shadowfax.
Yes, dude. There's nothing that I couldn't whistle. The problem is that when somebody's like, "Hey, whistle," I'm like, I can't like not smile and get embarrassed and all that. So that's why I don't make as much money as Taylor Swift and have concerts, for my whistling. So anyway, the next section is really, really important. These are more like you should have this. Have your rule book and have your rules. Like you need to have a learn to play
Downloads.
video. You need to have a rulebook download, even if it's like a Google Doc. Like give me something so that I can say, okay, all of this stuff, I can look at the rules if I wanted. And a lot of people will, and they'll ask questions about how this mechanic works or whatever. But if you don't have them, I think that it's a big problem. I will say what's really funny is that we have a rule reference for Council of the Fallen that actually never made it to, it still says coming soon, and it's locked in immortally locked now, as the coming soon banner without a link, which I thought was funny. But yeah, as long as you've got
maybe
that
a good
rule
idea to, you have a Deliverance rulebook and it's currently going to Board Game Geek. But if you had instead used a link that went to playdeliverance.com/rulebook, then you could set up a redirect so that you could then update this page effectively, because all you have to do is then change the redirect of that particular URL.
Yeah, that would have been smart. So then the next section is like for me, I want to. We're talking about demonstrating your product here on this Kickstarter page or GameFound, whatever. If you have the ability for somebody to play on Tabletop Simulator or Board Game Arena or somewhere, I know there are other programs that you can use to get your game content there and whatnot. People will do it, and the people that play will find that they really like it. And when they were on the fence, but they actually got a game in, they're like all in. And even people, there were people that played our first Deliverance game that were like, I don't know about this theme. It's a Christian thing. I'm not a Christian. I'm not that interested in this theme. But as soon as they play the game, they're like, dude, this game's amazing. And they back all in. That's because they actually were able to experience it and say, I like this. Right. So if you can have a hands-on way for somebody to play, that will really, really help. So highly recommend it. Not one of the first things you put, it's one of the last things, but very valuable.
Yeah, then you have social communities next, which I actually think could probably go at the very bottom of the page. I think this is maybe not as important. But then after that, you have previews and reviews. Again, this is super important. And I noticed here as well that you have lots of different types of reviews. You don't just have, here's, a playthrough, and they're just from different people. You have like a solo playthrough. You have a solo playthrough at the hardest difficulty. You have a playthrough with multiple people. You have kind of first thoughts videos. You got a wide selection of different takes and different videos to highlight different elements of the game. So I think that's worthwhile doing.
Yeah.
In fact, you separate your sort of your previews and your reviews, because you have reviews from the original campaign where people can actually give their full thoughts, and then you also have playthroughs.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's important. In particular, it's important to have at least one noteworthy reviewer that has name recognition. The Dice Tower or Man versus Meeple or like Board Game Co. Those were some that I used that I felt gave me, shelf side as well. Like they're good companies that that are generally known as reputable, that I recommend. You can also go with smaller people, but make sure you have at least one that is well known in the space. And I think that's just, we call it hygiene factor, but I think it's an important thing that will benefit you. But yeah, and then a playthrough video is really important. I think to have a playthrough video at each player count is really useful, but just at least one playthrough. I just want to see some mechanical interactions of how this game actually works, how I think it works in my head. Maybe I'm romanticizing it, but for the people that will watch playthrough videos, they want to know if this game is for them, because they only have a certain amount of disposable income. And if they're going to tie it up for 2 years on your project, it better be worth it. And so they want to see how it plays. Launching without a playthrough video, I think, is a huge mistake.
Yeah, I think another thing in terms of playthroughs is like not only just people playing the game, but also thinking about which company you choose to do that, because we'll have different sort of styles. And one thing I like about the shelf side playthroughs is that you can just tell they're just a bunch of friends, just a bunch of dudes who got together, and there's a lot of banter back and forth, and it adds this extra layer of entertainment to the review. So in a way, you're kind of watching the review to see how it plays, but also you're watching it because the guys are just entertaining and they're kind of just having fun playing a game. So that's also that part of this whole kind of playthrough. I think it's important that you find people who are genuinely just entertaining on camera, and they sort of are able to be quite normal and create some really good experiences.
Yeah, it's definitely the certain companies or certain people do such a great job with their videos, and shelf side is probably among the top in my opinion. See, after that, we've got the shipping section. I do think that subsidized shipping is important. If you want to look at how I subsidize shipping, you can see I chose not to include VAT in the cost of shipping, and VAT is paid separately. That's something that just it's you don't want to take on the burden of paying VAT, in my opinion. But then after that, you've got risks and challenges. You've got I put a refund and cancellation policy in there, as well as risks and challenges. I think that it's important not to neglect your risks and challenges section. You don't. I wrote an essay, but in general, it's like, why can I trust you? It's there are things that like our first game was delivered on time and received well, or we have a reputable manufacturing team, we have the right partners that are going to etc. We built in I mean, you're just giving people reasons that you're like de-risking your project for people. That's really what this section is about. How are you, like, what are the risks and how have you addressed them? And that's kind of where that's what I want to get out of this particular section. Well, we've talked about a ton of stuff. Hope you guys have found it valuable. And hope it helps you guys make more money and do better on your future crowdfunding. Until next time, Robot Richard, send us out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.